Before we get started, if you all would put your cell phones on mute or vibrate or whatever setting you need to put them on so that they don't ring, we would appreciate that. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the support we receive from our PTC administrators, our support staff, the English department faculty and staff, and from our donors who are listed on the back of your program. This series is only possible through the generous support of the people and organizations listed there, and you will find a green donor form in your program because green is the sign of money. So this is the moment where I have to try and apply some green from you. If you enjoy what you hear tonight and would like to help Pulaski Tech continue to bring readers and presenters for the series, there's information on the green form about how you can donate. And we now have, thanks to Lennon Parker and Marsha Hines' office, we now have an online donation ability to take credit cards. So that's in the program itself if you need that information. There's also a pink survey in your program, and it's going to be very important. I'm going to ask you all to fill that out at the end of the night because we collect that data and use it to apply for grants so that we can offer our wonderful guests small honoraria for their time and energy to be here and share with you their knowledge. Yes, one last thing before we get to our speakers tonight. This, for the first year, the Pulaski Technical College English Department is pairing with the Arkansas Writers Conference. And I know we have at least 2 people here from a writers group in Arkansas. There they are. Out on the table, there was some information about the Arkansas Writers Conference, which will be going on June 6th and 7th at our Little Rock South location. So if you are interested in learning more about that, be sure to grab one of the flyers from the table on your way out tonight. Without further ado, we're going to begin our speaking for the night. Oh, I should explain what's been up on the screen. I stumbled across this website last week, dearenglishmajor.com. And this was started by a woman who had graduated with her English degree several years ago and didn't know what she was going to do with this degree because she wasn't going to teach. So she now solicits people to take these small interviews and post their information. So it's another resource for you all once you leave here tonight to go and look for more information. And I just stumbled on this person, Emily Williamson, graduated from UCA. Who knew? But now lives in Seattle. So, yay. Anyway, so that's a resource for you all. Annie's going to be talking first, and I'll introduce her, get her set up here first. Okay. We're going to hear from Annie Bergman first. She's the Global Communications Manager for Heifer International. She plans, assigns, and develops content for the nonprofit's communication channels, including the website, marketing campaigns, World Arc magazine, which I believe we have some there, and the World Arc blog, which she's going to talk to you about in just one moment. Bergman received her bachelor's degree in English language and literature from the University of Tulsa in Oklahoma, and a master's degree in Australian Aboriginal Studies from the University of Melbourne in Australia. Please help me welcome Annie Bergman.
Thank you. Like Sandy said, my name is Annie Bergman. My name is actually Annie Bergman Jatina. Annie Bergman's my pen name. No, it's okay. It's because I'm kind of confused about it. I've been married for almost 2 years. My husband is apparently on his way, and he's going to be embarrassed. But anyway, when I got married, I had a real struggle with trying to figure out whether or not I should change my name. And I am a writer, and I thought, nope, people know me as Annie Bergman. My byline has been out there as Annie Bergman. I'm going to keep Annie Bergman. And so anyway, I always kind of dreamed of having a pen name, and it's not a creative one, but there it is. So you can too have a pen name one day. I'm really excited to be here, and it's really gratifying to see so many people in the audience that either are writers or want to become professional writers. And I'm kind of surprised that I'm speaking, honestly, because until I got asked to do this, I hadn't thought much about how I became a writer or why I became a writer. It was just something that happened and something that I fell into. it fits, it's perfect, it's exactly what I want to do, and I think I figured that out about 3 years ago. So if you're still unsure, this is what's right for you, that's okay. The more I thought about it though, what led me here is stories. I love stories. And I'm going to take you way back. Growing up, my parents read to me every single night, or told me stories every single night. My brother and I shared a room, and my mom told us stories that she made up. And so we sort of got to live in this make-believe world. And as I got older, my dad told me stories, and he had this big, thick book of Greek mythology. And I loved Greek mythology. You know, again, larger than life. I got to know about Icarus and Ulysses and Pegasus, and I lived there. I lived in those worlds, and I loved hearing those stories. And then he introduced me to movies, and again, larger than life stories. I could just live there, right? So fast forward to high school. I love stories, not really thinking much beyond it, other than I know I love them. And my mom was my high school English teacher. So I had my mom as a sophomore, junior, and senior. My mom was also the journalism sponsor. So it was in high school where I kind of started to understand the mechanics of a story and how to write a story and how to dissect a good story. So it was really, I owe most of this to my mom and dad. My dad was the one that taught me to love a good story, and my mom was the one that taught me to write a good story. So I graduated from high school and did what every high school kid does and gets a job. And I ended up working for my local newspaper, which is bizarre. No 17-year-old I've ever known worked for a daily newspaper at that point, but that's what I was doing. I don't know how I found out about it or why I took the job, but I did. It was really trial by fire. I didn't know much beyond what my mom had taught me in journalism class. I just knew that I enjoyed it. So I spent a summer really sort of honing that set of skills as much as a 17-year-old could. Went to college, got to college, went back into English classes because I had to, you know, Comp 1, Comp 2, those kinds of things. And for 2 solid years, I took classes that were interesting to me. I didn't declare a major. I didn't want to declare a major. I didn't know what I was going to do after 4 years were up. Had no idea what I wanted to be. And about halfway through my first semester as a junior, the University of Tulsa came to me and they said, you have to declare a major. If you're doing fine in school, you're going to be on track to graduate. If you declare a major, you have to do this. It's time. So I looked at all the credits that I'd been taking, and they were all English. So the apple didn't fall too far from the tree on that one. I kind of decided, all right, well, I have to do this, so English it is. And it wasn't really until that point that I started hearing what Sandy was saying earlier. What are you going to do with that degree? You going to be a teacher? And it really made me mad. Nowhere at any point did I think that it was going to put me in a hole. And I went back to my mom and dad and I said, you know, people are just assume that I'm going to be a teacher. What's going on? And I remember my dad looked at me and he said, you're learning the skills that are going to pay off in anything that you choose to do. You're learning how to communicate. You're learning how to write, and that's fundamental. People are going to need that. So I kind of took that, and I bought a little bit more time after I graduated because I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I had this degree. And I went to Australia. And that degree was interdisciplinary. I got to take courses in politics, in fine art, in history, all across the board. But what I realized there was that in sitting and talking to the Aboriginal people in various language groups, whether I was talking to them about their art or their language or their history or their politics, they all told me stories. And that was the hook. I talked to a woman about why she was painting what she was painting, and she told me a story about the honey ant dreaming. And so it again was all coming back to stories. I came back, I graduated, I moved to Little Rock, and I figured that I had bought about as much time as I could, and it was time to get a job. So I started, you know, again looking at what I was doing, what I had done, and writing. I had been a writer. So what was I going to do with that? I applied to television stations, I applied to the Associated Press, I kind of applied everywhere. I ended up getting a job at the AP. And I thought, okay, this is what I've done. I can do this again, no big deal. And talk about a trial by fire. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Ernest Hemingway and how he went to work at the Kansas City Star, but not that I'm comparing myself to Ernest Hemingway. But it really does teach you how to write and how to tell a story and how to tell a story in this much space. So I did that for 2.5 years. And what I learned was that I really liked sitting with people and hearing their stories, and then the challenge was trying to tell it in as good of a way as they had told it to me. But then I realized that news wasn't really my thing, because when breaking news was happening, I was watching the television. Well, all of my colleagues were like, all right, who are we going to call? Who can we get quote from? And I was like, hey guys, look what's happening. So it was time for me to leave that job, as much as I liked it. And I found a job at Heifer International, where I am today. But the job I found 6 years ago was for a copywriter. I went out on a limb and applied for it, and they gave it to me. And that's where I learned how to write ads and marketing materials, brochures, radio spots, video scripts. Any external facing content that came out of Heifer International, chances were I either wrote part of it, wrote all of it, edited some of it, and that was also fantastic. It was a new way of writing. It was another different kind of job that I found using the skills that I had built up all those years before. About 3 years into that, one of the writers for the magazine left, and during my time as a copywriter, they had given me a chance to write for the magazine as well. And that's where I really found my home, and that's really where I found my voice. And the 2.5 years that I was with the magazine, I was lucky enough to travel to Honduras, Kosovo, Vietnam, Cambodia, India, Ghana, and the Philippines. And in each place, I spent about 10 days just talking to people. And if you give people enough time and build enough trust with them, and they get to know you and you get to know them, they will tell you almost anything. And each trip I've taken, each person I've talking to, there you go, English! Each person I've talked to has changed my life irrevocably. The day that I came back from Kosovo, started digesting what I had heard there, to this day, to think about the women that I spoke to there who had lost their husbands and sons in the war in the 1990s, it's moving, it's fascinating. Now, like Sandy said, I'm the Global Communications Manager. That doesn't really mean anything. It's okay. Oh. What I like to say is that I'm a content strategist. So I've been at Heifer for 6 years, and for a long time, the departments didn't talk to one another. Again, communication, yay. And what I found was that when I would go around and talk to folks and say, hey, we're doing this, can I help you at all? Or what are you doing? Do I have something that might be able to help you? There was a clear need for the organization to speak with one voice, and we weren't doing that. And so I filled this sort of niche role to bring departments together to get them to talk about the same thing at the same time. And it's been happening for 6 months. I've never seen anything work like this, but it's amazing what that kind of thing can do. We're all telling the same story. And we're seeing an uptick slightly in donations, and it's unbelievable. So this is all to say that stories are really powerful. And what you're doing right now as English students are learning the mechanics of telling a good story, or reading a good story, finding out what is a good story. People's attention spans have shifted so much recently that, and I'm sure all of you guys are on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. I know that people are abandoning Facebook at this point. And so people's attention spans are this long. But that's all you need to hook somebody into a good story. So just keep on doing what you're doing, okay? And I promise you, if you can write 30 words, that are going to hook somebody. You can get them like in the blog we've got up here. This is the World Art blog that I write for almost every day. You can write something that's 500 words long that's going to link them to a magazine story that's 3,500 words long. So keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Eliza Borné, who has recently been promoted to managing editor at the Oxford American. So the information in your program is slightly out of date, as it says she's an associate editor. So we congratulate her on her promotion. Previously, she was an associate editor at BookPage, a national book review publication distributed in public libraries and bookstores. Her writing has appeared in the Oxford American, the Boston Globe magazine, Every Day with Rachel Ray, the Arkansas Times, AY, and other publications. She graduated from Wellesley College with a degree in English. Help me welcome Eliza Borné.
Thank you. Also want to thank Sandy for inviting me to speak with you guys. I love getting to talk to English majors and aspiring writers and editors, particularly about the job search process, which I think can be kind of daunting and mysterious when you're facing graduation and trying to figure out the next step. So my story is similar to Annie's in that how I became interested in writing and editing really started with a love of reading. Also, my parents read to me from a very young age, and reading has kind of always been my favorite hobby. From reading novels, magazines, newspapers, blogs, from a very young age, I always knew that whatever I did, I wanted it to involve reading in some way. I think my story is a little different in that for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to be an editor. I kind of got an early introduction to what editing was and have been on that track pretty much ever since. I can tell you a little bit about what I did as a college student and I think made me a desirable candidate for editorial roles after I graduated. But when I was in, I think, fifth grade or maybe sixth grade for a job shadow day, I somehow got connected with the editor of the Arkansas Times, and that was, I guess, one of the only jobs that my parents knew that involved writing and editing, and connected me with them, and I ended up spending a day at the Arkansas Times and just thought it was, like, loved the newsroom atmosphere, thought the teamwork that went into building a publication from start to finish was so cool, just somehow saw myself there, and from then on, I, let's see. Well, let me jump forward a little bit from job shadowing as a fifth grader. When I was in high school, I got an opportunity to start writing reviews for the Arkansas Times. This was sort of a fluke. I had gone to a children's theater play with the child of an Arkansas Times editor, and knew I'd gone to the play, gave me the opportunity to write the review. And after doing that, I decided to enroll in a journalism class at Central High School, and worked my way up to editor of that publication. And again, just, I think, got so excited about the working with writers to craft stories. I think what I do as an editor is I conceptualize stories with writers to turn into let me back up a little bit. You got this. editors.
Doing a good job.
Sorry. I work with writer. Do you all know what editors do? Kind of. Do you have an idea of what? Let me show you kind of what that. Very good. I'm not much of a speaker because editors are really listeners. Where I work, this is where I work. It's the Oxford American Magazine. It's a quarterly nonprofit literary magazine. It's one of, I think, our best exports in Arkansas. It's published on the campus of the University of Central Arkansas, and it's really filled with some of the most amazing stories. We publish, well, I'll give you an example from this current issue of some of the pieces I worked on. We published like a almost 10,000 word feature on a python hunt in Florida that is about the python problem in Florida and about some of the environmental issues that have resulted from this invasive species, also about some of the crazy characters who actually hunt for pythons in Florida, stories like that. We publish, let's see, in this particular issue we've got poetry, we've got fiction, we've got more investigative reported pieces. We have a beautiful long essay on Flannery O'Connor's prayer journal. And it's really awesome to get to work with the writers who come up with these stories and pitch them to us and to help them make it better. So what I do now, and then I'll back up and tell you how I got there, is writers come to us usually with ideas. Sometimes they'll come to us with a completed piece, sometimes it's just a nugget of an idea, sometimes we'll have a conversation with the writer and we're like, yes, there's a story there, you need to explore that. And sometimes I'm doing more developmental editing, so that might mean that I have a phone conversation with the writer and she might say something like I live in Florida and there's this park down an hour away from my house where there are mermaids there. There's a real national park and there are people who perform as mermaids there every day. And it's just really weird. Like, how can we draw this out? Like, what's the history of that place? What's the people who work there? What other surrounding issues are at play? And so that's more developmental, trying to figure out what a story is. So I do that, but also there's a lot of work that happens when a writer turns a story into us. So this is, our stories are, we publish a wide range of lengths, but our stories for the most part are pretty complex. We publish up to 20,000 word stories that are very long, complex, almost novella-length pieces. And there's a lot of legwork that goes into, that comes between a writer turning us a Word document to this beautiful, complete piece that you see in the magazine. And what I do the most of is line editing. So going through a piece, moving around paragraphs, deleting paragraphs, querying a writer, stretching them to expand on an idea that they have that feels underdeveloped. Helping them write sentences. Sometimes we call it ventriloquism. I have to rewrite sentences a lot of the time. And it's just really fascinating. Since I've been at the OA for a little more than a year, and let's see, right now I'm working on a piece about a folk artist, about a collector of rare 78s, about the representation of domestic workers in fiction and film. I worked on stories about Elvis, written by a bass player and the Sun Records session band. Worked on a story about eBay shopping addiction, about a country songwriter, multiple pieces about hunting accidents, about a bean grower in West Virginia, about a Greyhound trip across the country, about the death of an immigrant coming in Texas. It's just real, it really is all about the stories and it's all about the voice of the writer, and it's just so much fun to get to develop these pieces with them. And one of the challenges too of this work is developing what we call in the office what our bedside manner is going to be. The writers that we work with are very gifted, often very sensitive, And what I'm joking about being a listener, usually I don't feel like people are listening to me because I'm on the other end of the phone listening to the writer and trying to figure out how to convey the changes that I think would make the piece better. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what my day as an editor at the OA is like. There are a lot of other things that we do because our staff is so small. The OA has beautiful artwork in the magazine, and we do all of that research and licensing in our office. We also do social media and have a new newsletter and edit press releases and manage all of the marketing and publicity that comes from the magazine. But the heart of what I do is working with the writers. So the way that I got there is I graduated from college in 2009, and as I was trying to say before, I was kind of on this track of knew I wanted to work for a publication because I had this connection with the Arkansas Times and just had a sense that that was what I was supposed to do. In college, I was the person that my friends always came to edit their papers, and because I read all the time, I think I had a gift and an ear for being able to identify good, strong writing and to make pieces of writing better. And when I went to college, I think I was at first maybe a little resistant of continuing on this path. I thought, I took astronomy classes and statistics classes and lots of other stuff trying to make sure maybe I was missing my calling. But it all came back to the English classes. It's what I loved the most, and loved actually writing English papers. And the summer after my first year in college, I applied for an internship at the Oxford American. This was in 2006. And one of my biggest pieces of advice for job hunting is I think there is a big element of hustle in it. That has been my experience. Applied for an internship. I was 19. Did not get a call back. Probably 2 months had gone by since I sent in my internship application. It was almost the summer. And finally, I was shy, and I was embarrassed about calling them and following up, but called the editor of the magazine 5 times, talked his ear off somehow, called that from within myself to try to convince him to give me a job. I think finally to get me off the phone, he said I could show up on the first day of the internship. And so I did, and I really thank the Oxford American for introducing me to magazines. I don't think I knew at that point what kind of editor I wanted to be because I love reading books. I was also interested in being a book editor. I discovered pretty quickly. I also interned for a publishing house after that first summer that I love the pace of working for a magazine, especially quarterly. We're publishing so many pieces in a year. Each issue is about 140 pages long or so. So it's always different. I get to work with lots of different writers and on lots of different pieces. But I prefer this deadline pace to something a little quicker. Before I was at the OA, the publication I worked for was monthly, and I also edited a daily e-newsletter and a blog, and I like the slightly slower deadline. I like being able to go through, I think, a more kind of thoughtful editorial process than I was able to when I had a much faster deadline. But when I graduated from college, I'll fast forward a little bit to job searching and the having to hustle aspect of it. Didn't have a job, and I was applying for job listings that I found online for editorial positions, and was not getting very many bites. It was very frustrating. And I moved to Nashville because my boyfriend was there, and I had friends there, and I wanted to move to a different city, but it felt more manageable than moving to New York, where most magazine editorial jobs are. And I got a job at a bakery and worked behind the counter all summer, and then started doing informational interviews like crazy, which I think is a very big part of networking in the publishing business. So basically what an informational interview is you're asking a publication if you can come have an interview, but there's not a job available. So you say, can I come pick your brain for 10 minutes, meet you at your office to talk about the work that you do? And again, it was very stressful for me to call people up and in some cases actually walk in the door of a place where I didn't know anyone. But I did, and would literally practice practice with my mom or with my friends, trying to sell myself what my qualities were, why I would be a good editor. And finally, after probably maybe 15, 20 interviews, I got lucky. And I had walked into the office of Book Page, which is, you can find it in the Central Arkansas Library System. It's a book review publication. Dropped off my resume. I was on my way to another job interview, so I had on my interview outfit. And tried to sell myself to the editor, followed up with a thank you note, and she gave me a writing assignment, which I did and did well on. And then it was just sort of the time when the organization was starting a blog. They were starting to do Facebook and Twitter and have social media and do videos for their YouTube channel. And they needed someone to help with the web stuff. So a position was created for me to be the assistant web editor. And that was how I got my first full-time editorial job. But really, I was always stressed out when I heard about how I needed to do networking because I felt like I didn't actually know anybody. And I didn't know how to create my own network. But my advice to you guys would be to, well, if you're interested in working for a publication in Arkansas, to make a list of the publications that you like and to try to figure out who works there and to call them or to email them and to ask if there are any writing opportunities or if you can do an informational interview or just be very genuine and persistent in trying to follow up with them. Let's see. Okay, are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
Okay, while I get that, I'm going to get this. There we go. Okay, so now we are going to hear from Bobby Ampezzan, who is currently the editor of the high-profile section of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, but with whom I went to graduate school. So when I saw him talking to Dean Joey Cole, I said, "Stop talking about me." We don't have to tell those stories tonight, but so he works for edits the high-profile section of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and he was a staff writer for that publication for 4 years prior to this. His work has also appeared in the Oxford American and Arkansas Life magazines, the Guardian newspaper, and other places. He has an MFA in creative writing from the University of Arkansas and a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Dickinson College. Bobby.
Hi. Sandy said we have to restate our name and our profession. My name is Bobby Ampezzan. I'm the editor of the high profile section. Do most or some of you know what that section is? It comes out on Sunday in the Democrat Gazette. Usually it's a main portrait of someone and then inside. What's that?
It's the most fun section.
I hear that a lot. I hear that it's the first section that people pick up in the morning. I think that's because it's got a lot of photos and not a lot of reading if you don't read the main story. Before I forget, I want to thank my panelists, Annie and Eliza. I feel really honored to be a part of this panel, and I feel really honored to be a part of the Big Rock reading series. Sandy's grown it. I mean, every time there's an update or an announcement of new writers, I pay attention. I'm curious. So, I didn't know what this was going to be like, so I did like a PowerPoint that obviously is going to be a little weird. But I hope that it's not taken as glib. I don't mean to be glib, especially following these two because some of the things they said I thought were really profound. So, does everybody know the Game of Life, the actual board game? Yeah. I grew up playing on the 1977 version, which is shameful to. It was a board. It had a 10-digit dial that you spun, and you worked your way around the board. And the goal, the aim of the game, was to finish the game with $1 million. Very early in the game, there are these career spaces. One of them is a doctor, one of them is a lawyer. Those two were really big money. Every time you get a payday, it was like $50,000, which again in 1977 was quite a bit more than it sounds like today. Below that was a teacher, which I thought was fine, and below that was a reporter. And this is how I know I've been fated for this job. I used to doctor the dial when nobody was looking to land on the reporter's job, knowing that it meant my destiny was to fail the game. You cannot win that game on a reporter's cell. You cannot win the game of life on a reporter's cell. Right?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So this is me when I was really little. The two things I wanted to be was a superhero, but already sensing that may not happen. I was interested in pictures and narrative, and to a lesser degree, words. Unlike these two guys who in high school were already working for newspapers, you could see from my dossier that I really was an average student. And in fact, well, I'm not going to say that. So, one of the things that I like is I like to be droll and ironic as opposed to actually forthright with my feelings, and that's very good. I graduated from Dickinson College, small school in Pennsylvania of about 2,000 kids, a little similar to Hendrix, if you're familiar with that school in Conway. Dickinson College is in Pennsylvania, and I just said that it's a little similar to Hendrix College in Conway. I got a BA in Environmental Studies. Why is it not a BS in Environmental Science? Because that required organic chemistry. And I really do, I didn't put this up as a joke, but I really do think that staying away from drugs was one of the best decisions I made in college. From there, I got a Master's of Fine Art degree in fiction. Did you really?
Yes.
Incidentally, this is the fiction writer who's coming next month. His name is Adam Prince. So, they reset his jaw, but he sort of got that Javier Bardem thing from the last Bond movie where he can take it up. No, I'm kidding. So I got a Master's of Fine Art. I was, again, a very average student. And you know that because I never had a story published while I was there. This is Halloween or something. What do you get for graduate school? This photo is of a truck that I bought for $450. That lasted me 3 of the 4 years that I was at Arkansas. I'm obviously really proud of this truck, despite what I'm doing there. A graduate school like the University of Arkansas, to my mind, unless you really get on a roll with publishing, which actually Sandy did with poetry, one of the best things it does for you, it gives you real-world classroom experience as a teacher. And it just incredibly improves your poise, and actually makes you a better student of the English language to be a teacher. So I really feel like that was the best thing I got out of it. It's excellent practice writing, but unlike other graduate programs, there really are no job prospects. Many people graduate and become completely, get into completely different professions. Also, and this is a tricky thing that I learned through experience, you can overshoot entry-level jobs. So I didn't do an internship. I had a degree, a bachelor's degree from a pretty decent college, and then I had an MFA. And I kid you not, within 4 months, I had responded to a newspaper ad looking for a leaf raker. I did that job for 1 day, and he said, I can't keep you on. I'm going to take this other girl that I've been having write please with me, because I think she's going to stick around longer. As a result, I went through 18 months of unemployment. Landscaper, hotel clerk. I was a college instructor, but it was not good pay. It wasn't a full-time job. The plasma donor thing was just, I was kind of pleasant. In 2005, I got my first real job, and by real job I mean it was full-time and had benefits. I got a job with a suburban newspaper in Detroit, and like almost every first job you would get as a newspaper reporter, you cover a lot of municipal meetings, school boards, city councils, or here their board of directors, planning potentially, and then of course profiles of crime and accidents, profiles of people, etc. One of the things I learned, having come from an MFA, is really in newspapers the the value placed on writing is really small. And I mean, you could be a good reporter and not a very good writer. And I was the opposite. I was a completely unqualified reporter who thought, in fact, I got this job because I fabricated 3 news stories and submitted that as my application. I told them that they were fabricated, but I said, look, I mean, I faked a gas leak, and then I did a movie review, and then I faked a profile on an autistic basketball kid. I never met. So the pay was $25,000, which was even low then, if it sounds low. A daily, the Times-Herald in 2007. This is a Gannett-owned paper. I'll be honest, I get a little bit editorial here when I say Gannett really doesn't care about your writing and only a bit about you as a human being. But that's how I felt. I really was overworked and they didn't care. Then I went to the Democrat-Gazette, and things got really good because despite what you think about the Democrat-Gazette, and believe me, I hear a lot of complaints, and they're valid. Some of the complaints I agree with. But it's a family-owned newspaper with a demonstrated history of cutting staff and news whole reluctantly. Almost every other big news conglomerate, a McClatchy, a New York Times company, or whatever company is their parent company, Gannett for sure, they go through these pretty massive layoffs where it's just by the books, just cut 20% staff. We've gone through a couple of rounds of layoffs, but they've been fairly small. And there's been an eye toward really trying to keep people around, even if it means moving them into new positions. The Democrat-Gazette is the only paper I've worked for and really read, other than the New York Times. Well, the Wall Street, there are some, national newspapers care about good writing. But the Democrat-Gazette is the only one that I think is more statewide that really values good writing. Am I good at my job? If I'm up here, it means that I'm a decent writer. I didn't get to this position otherwise. But I've also had to learn that when you start out, everything that you write you think is ambrosia, and it's not. I mean, in newspapers, some of the best stuff you write will get the fewest eyes. But if you write about a birth at a zoo, man, you'll get so many page views, and you can write it poorly, but. If people don't like my writing, it doesn't mean they don't like me. That was something that I had to learn when I was young. And I continually ask of better writers, and that could be better fiction writers or better long-form journalists. How did they do that? How did they make that happen, whether it's playing with structure or time, or just wonderful turns of phrases? Am I a good interviewer? I think the key to being a good interviewer is getting the, mustering the courage to ask some difficult questions. Has anybody, if you've seen House of Cards, as if anybody's watched the 2nd season, there's a really sort of awful and gut-wrenching moment where a TV interviewer asks this woman, the vice president's wife, about these abortions that she's had. Or I think maybe it's an abortion, even though we know as the viewer that it's more than one. It takes so much temerity to ask somebody about a divorce or about a past conviction they've had. But you have to ask them, and then you have to play fair with the answers. And by playing fair, I just mean you have to include it if it's integral. And sometimes you have to not include it if you decide that it really isn't integral to the profile. A good reporter is different than a good writer. I think I'm a good writer. I don't know if I'm a good reporter. I never say that. A good reporter is really good at cultivating sources, ferreting out archived reports, seeking online databases, much more so than putting it well. A good reporter always asks, what's really interesting here? Is there a nugget here that needs further exploration? A good reporter follows the money if you're in the, following the city or politics or crime. And one of my biggest pet peeves in journalism is that media, television, and Hollywood have absolutely ruined the phrase off the record. I have so many people tell me, can I go off the record? And I say, I'm a features writer. I don't go off the record. Why? Because we're not talking about Watergate. We're talking about, your stewardship of this petting farm or something like that. What cover-up are we? This is perhaps sort of a repeat slide. This was a story I did on the New Madrid Fault, which is an earthquake. It's a fault line in the United States. A big earthquake happened about 200 years ago. And 24 years ago, this pseudo-scientist named Ivan Browning predicted that in 1990 there'd be a massive new earthquake around Jonesboro. It didn't happen, but people went nuts. So when I say a good story has context, I mean that I could have just talked about the possibility of a New Madrid quake, but to me the most interesting thing was the fear that surrounds a New Madrid quake. And the best example of that was the 1990 fear stirred up by this guy, Ivan Browning. All media is entertainment. I know that you would think that a newspaper, even an encyclopedia entry, that the purpose of it is news, but the fact is, almost all of that media we go to be entertained. I mean, there are people who bring up Wikipedia pages just to be entertained, just to read something. And the same thing with newspapers. And that's why when we put out a newspaper on our website, we have most viewed stories. And almost all of the most viewed ones have some element of entertainment. The most useful, we should have another tab that says most useful news to make people feel bad, because it may be 5 completely different stories. All right, so now to you. How do I get a story published? Number 2, find the right kind of publication. Being a good writer is not enough, and a bad writer is no excuse. Both Eliza and Annie started working for newspapers when they were teenagers. What does that tell you? That tells you that a newspaper is looking for copy. You do not have to be a world-class writer to get printed in a newspaper or many other publications. And that goes for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette too. What you do have to do, and the writer Jack Hitt has this great thing I was trying to find for you guys. He did this class at University of California, Berkeley, where he talked about the art of the query. The art of going to an editor and saying, I want you to print me. I want you to publish me. And here's what I can offer you. And basically what he says is that editors don't want new things unless you're somebody, who can, if you're Charles Portis or Alice Munro, yes, the Oxford American will take your stuff. If you're that big, yes, you can get published. But generally speaking, from the Oxford American to my own section, the high profile section, I want what we did last week. I just want new material. But I basically want the same thing. And you can do that if you look at the publications that you love or you think would publish you. Look at what they're printing, and if you think you can emulate them, go to that editor with a pitch. If it's guns and ammo, don't go to the editor with a food story unless it's a food that you kill first. Try to keep it within the bounds of what they're already doing. If you pitch editors what you think they already want to hear, you'll get a much more receptive response. How do I get a good job? You get a good job by being indispensable. There was a writer in the Northwest who, for another publication, was just breaking all these great business news stories. And finally, our business editor went to him and said, "How much are you making?" And whatever he told her, she said, however much more she pitched him, she said, "Let's say I'll give you 25% more if you come to write for me, because I need the stories that you're writing." So that's one way. That's the hardest way, I'll be honest with you. You can also get a job by proving you can already do the job, i.e. freelancing. And the high profile section takes all kinds of freelancers. But you got to be able to do that kind of story. So that would involve, getting a bunch of sections, looking at how it works, and then going out and saying, I think I can approach this person. I know you publish people like this. I'm going to give you a 2,000 word profile on them, and please consider it for publication. And if it's good and I read it, I'll say sure, If you do that enough, you'll just be in line for that job when a job opens. You could get a job just by showing up. There are people in the newsroom at the Democrat-Gazette who started off as clerks, but they just were there. There's that Woody Allen line about however much of life is just showing up. If you're there, work sort of trickles to you eventually. I'm sorry, did I skip a last one? You can also get a job as Eliza. I've never heard this, informational interview. I've never heard that phrase. That's amazing. Yeah, you just call up people and say, look, please talk to me for 10 minutes. I know you don't have a job, but I'd really like to learn more about what you do. That makes people, that helps them to remember that you're out there. And again, you can pick their brain about what it is they do and how you can help them to do that. Will there be a job for me? Now, when we talk about journalism, the big question is, in 10 years, will there even be a newspaper? Will there be magazines? What will they look like? I don't know the answer to those. I think in 10 years there will still be print products, but certainly more and more of it will move online. This is, has anybody heard of Patch, AOL's program Patch? I don't think it really got started in Arkansas in any meaningful way, but the idea was you have a single reporter who ran around 24/7, gathering all kinds of news, posting it on your city's Patch site. So let's say you're from DeQueen, Arkansas. You start Patch DeQueen, and you go to the fires, you go to the jail, you get mugshots, whatever it is that newspapers would do, you are that person. And the idea was hyper-local. You know, this would be a news source for people living in DeQueen to find out about DeQueen. I think it's not done so well recently, partly because they didn't pay those reporters very much and it was really stressful. But nonetheless, you know, old journalism suffers from overhead, buildings, printing presses. New journalism suffers from the free model. You know, there are lots of great websites, but they're never charging anything. And eventually a lot of them go, you know, we can just keep doing pop-up ads, but we can't really expand. There's also the nonprofit micropayment models, which is too much to get into now, but are somewhat encouraging. Or you could do something else. At the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, we have copy editors that, you know, Eliza's talked about a little bit. These are people who look at the copy. They're sort of proofreaders, but they're much more than proofreaders. They're looking for structure, they're fact-checking. They are basically a better set of eyes than you are on your own work. Wire editing is pulling copy from the AP for use. We actually have illustrators. If you ever get a Saturday newspaper, the sports section during a Razorback football, during that season, there's always that drawing of a Razorback. As the season goes on, he gets more and more battered. You know, unless it's a good season. Anyway, we have a guy that does that. Of course, photographers, clerking, we actually have a newspaper library, and then online editing. So that's my presentation. I'm sure that I've skipped some things, but I hope you enjoy it, and I think we'll all welcome any questions that you might
have. Under library you have on the PowerPoint there for the Democrat Gazette, what does that person do?
That person maintains the archives. We have a morgue at the Democrat Gazette that goes back to, I think, 1818. I don't know what newspaper was publishing in 1818. And in other words, it wasn't the Gazette, and it's certainly, I don't think it was the Democrat. Frankly, too, those microfilm, it's so awful you can barely read it. But we also have clipping envelopes, and so the librarian handles it just like any library. I mean, files it according to some logical file system, and when we need somebody, we can say, you know, I've got a Percy David Jackson who, you know, I'm writing about. Can you see if we've got any files on that person?
Thank you. Getting stage direction. I feel like Oprah. This is for Eliza. How did Oxford American come to Arkansas?
The magazine was founded in 1992 in Oxford, Mississippi. That's where the name comes from. And we moved to Arkansas, not sure of the year, moved to Little Rock for funding reasons. There was a media company that agreed to publish the magazine. It's gone through several iterations, and now we're in a nonprofit model and we're affiliated with UCA. So that's how we came to Conway. But it was a business decision.
Oh, see, y'all are just making me get my workout.
When y'all, for writers or whatnot, how much is the going rate at the newspaper, and do y'all pay your writers for Oxford? Heifer International. I mean, what's the going rate for it?
For my section, the going rate for a cover story, which is 2,000 words, is $300. For most other cover sections, and I don't know if I said this, but I've got one here that's actually got a piece that I wrote, if anybody wants to pick it up, on ivory-billed woodpeckers. It's much less. I think it's like 150 or 200. It sort of depends on your experience, but generally the rates are about that.
We do pay all of our writers, and it really depends on what section you're writing for. For our pieces in our front section, the range is $500 to $750 generally, and for our features, it could be up to probably $2,000, $3,000. That's rare. That's a very long piece.
Okay.
And same for us. This is really bizarre, but the nonprofit seems to pay the best of us up here. Same for us, really, as the OA. It depends. About an 800-word piece, and it kind of depends on whether or not you've freelanced before and what you can talk our managing editor into in the contract. But about an 800-word piece, you can get about $750 for. So, but it's about $750 to $1,000, depending on what you're doing and how long the article is.
When you say freelance, that means like, let's say a simple guy like me writes a story or something crazy, and then I just send it in to you guys, and y'all just say, I don't know what we're gonna do with this. That's freelancing, right? Just making sure.
Yeah, I mean, again, the best thing that you can do is look at what we publish and do something similar. I mean, in the case of Heifer, you can't just write about the drug scene in the river market, you know.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, one of the things that both of these guys talked about, I think more than I did, is just keep on, you could just keep banging on doors, and eventually editors, we were all in these seats at some time, and so we generally act very humanely. We want to help you even if we don't know you.
Right.
We don't want to be a jerk.
And I should add, make an addendum to what I said too. A lot of times, what we're doing has the additional travel element to it as well. So we'll pay travel, but then what the payoff is for the article is in line. It's all relative, if you kind of get what I'm saying. So, like what Bobby was saying, we're very niche. We're not going to take a whole wide range of stuff. So.
But that brings up a good point that you could look at multiple different nonprofits or organizations that put out publications and see what they might be interested in to find out where you could get some work. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then our panelists are going to hang around afterwards, so if you have a question you want to ask and didn't get a chance to, feel free to come on up.
Oh, is there an official process for looking for internships?
This is for Eliza or?
So there is, and it involved, at Heifer, it involves our HR department. We don't typically advertise many internships because we don't have a lot. That said, we are looking for a writer intern right now. So what you can do is, honestly, like what Eliza was saying and what Bobby was saying, knock on doors, contact one of us. I've got my cards up here, email me. Let me know if you're interested, and if you are, then I can initiate the conversation with our HR department and make it more formal after that, and we'll let you know what the process is for submitting an application.
The Oxford American does have a formal internship program. I brought some flyers about it if anyone is interested. You can apply, all of the information is online, but you can apply via Submittable, which is our online submission system. You can also take one of my cards and send your application directly to me. We just passed our deadline for our summer internship, although if anyone is dying to have an Oxford American internship, I'd be happy to take the application now. And then our deadline's a little later in the summer. for the fall program. And it's a great program. There's, if you're interested in publishing, our staff is so small that you really get involved in every step of the production process. So I'd be happy to talk about that after if anyone has questions.